Hey.
Hello. Let's see if that takes care of whatever the issue was. Does make me wonder if it's related to Big Sur or Skype or what.
I don't know, it was weird. Because I could still hear you.
Yeah, and I had no indication that I had a connection issue.
Yeah, I don't know. And then like when I tried to call you, like when we hung up and I tried to call you right back, it said you were offline.
Yeah, and I tried to call you as well, and it just rang and rang and rang, and then eventually timed out.
So I didn't get a ring. All I got was like I missed a missed call.
Interesting. Well, we'll see if it stays for more than a couple of minutes. And
So far so good. And
yeah, at least more than we got a moment ago.
yeah, and if something else goes wrong, I say you with the magic of editing can make it sound okay. But right when you stopped hearing me, I was about to say, like, I've got my microphone positioned in such a way that I can like look directly into it, speak directly into it, and hopefully you won't have the ups and downs from like 2 weeks ago.
Well, last week was much better as well. Both of us still kind of fluctuated a little bit. I know for the most part, neither one of us are perfect as far as positioning with the mic, but it was still much easier to work with last week. So
Good. So I thought of some follow up, but if you don't mind editing out a few moments of silence, I have a little bit of follow up from last week.
Sure.
Yeah, so what I'm doing is I told you about the rock garden on the Skyway loop, and just this week, one of the folks that I follow is on YouTube is hiking the Pinhoti Trail, which overlaps with the Skyway loop for a portion, and the portion that includes that rock garden. And she happened to post a video of hiking through the rock garden, and it gives a really good it really shows you what kind of rocks you're facing on that trail.
Cool. You gonna share the link then in the notes?
Yes. I was thinking of using YouTube DL just to send you the clip, but I'll put the full link. I'll send the full link to you.
Yeah, either way works. I added a note about indirect follow-up as well, or feedback. So once we get through what all you have to say, I've got just an interesting anecdote there.
Indirect feedback?
Yeah.
Like how?
So a mutual friend of ours was talking to Emily and mentioned they thought they might give the show a listen, and while they went and ran a quick errand to the grocery, and realized that was not going to be the case because they realized it was then 2 hours long and the first hour was about knives. And it was just kind of funny the way they said it.
Sorry, I missed that last second. I was trying to get this video for you, and the audio went loud in my head, and I didn't hear the last bit that you said. Like the most important part.
I'm paraphrasing it horribly because I don't have the message in front of me. But a mutual friend was talking to Emily about something else, and a final bullet point that they sent over in their message was, by the way, thought they would give the show a listen, and thought it would be quick, and they could listen to an episode while they ran to the grocery and picked up a couple of things, and found out that was not the case, that the show was 2 hours long and the first hour was about knives.
Yeah. So, the thing about it was, it's funny because a friend of mine was telling me about a podcast that he started listening to called This Week in Virology. And it's maybe 6 or 7 virologists mostly talking about coronavirus right now. But they've been around for like at least a year, more than a year, maybe a couple of years. And their show got really popular because of the coronavirus. And it's a really good podcast. But my friend was saying it's kind of long, and it's like like each episode's about 2 hours. And it's like, isn't that like regular length podcast? Because the two podcasts that I listen to on a weekly basis are the Talk Show and ATP, and it's rare for them to be under 2 hours.
So it's funny because the Talk Show is actually bi-weekly, And then ATP, of course, is weekly. And ATP is the example that I tend to go with just because it is, 2 hours plus on a weekly basis. Even though the talk show is more the format that I was thinking of when, thinking of the idea of this particular show. And I didn't realize that the talk show was bi-weekly because I was far enough back and trying to catch up that I had an episode to listen to every week anyway.
I actually didn't realize it was bi-weekly either. I thought it was just whenever he wanted to, because I just don't pay attention. And sometimes I'll let a few accumulate before I listen to them, and I'll listen to maybe like 2 in a row in a week. And so I didn't realize it was bi-weekly. Yeah,
it kind of let's try that again. It kind of took me off guard as well. Again, because at this point, I'm just not current on most shows, or maybe that's not the right way to phrase it. I think I have listened to the most current episode of both shows, but I still have some others that I'm filling in as I get time.
Yeah. So this week in virology has been my new filler. So just because I've been able to go through podcasts. So I put a link to the Rock Garden. My plan was to actually download the video, cut a snippet of that clip, and then send it to you. And I spent this afternoon putting my muffler back, or finishing up my muffler, and then driving around to listen to it and make sure everything's good to go. So I didn't do that, and so I thought I'd quickly do it now. And when I saw that it downloaded as an MKV, I was like, okay, I'll just send you the link and the timestamp. So there's a link there and the timestamp, and I wanted to get get your reaction to that Rock Garden.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up now.
So it's one of the things I actually really like about this is at the top of the hill. So you're not only going through a rock garden, but you're going up going up a hill through a lot of it. And at the top of the hill is like this really. Every picture or video and the time that I was at the top of this hill, this spot at the top, it would make a great campsite, but it's the spookiest spot I've ever been to. You're at the top of the hill. There's all these really tall trees. I've only ever been actually I went in the spring, but it's just foggy and just really cool and spooky looking. And I want to camp there one night. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
So is that timestamp accurate, or did it load a potentially different video? Okay, yeah, it loaded. I think I skipped too far and it loaded a different video. I'm pulling it up now.
Okay,
and that's kind of what I had in mind, what I pictured when you were talking about it. That would definitely not be fun to hike on if it were slippery at all.
Yeah, I think the time that I went, it was raining that day. It rained all night before, and it rained some that morning, so it was thoroughly wet, and there's leaves everywhere. But it's not fun, but it's not terrible. It's not as hard as the Gros Piton, but it's just you have to be quite careful.
And it looks like it's a little more short-lived than I was originally thinking as well.
Yeah, it's not too long.
It's just enough to be that treacherous segment that either you're going to make it through okay, or you're going to have a really rough time afterwards.
Yes, it's definitely something you have to be very careful. It would be so easy to turn an ankle, or best case scenario, have like a sprain an ankle or something like that. It's not something to take at ease. If you see that dog just scampering through there, it's nothing.
Well, of course, he has 4 legs to be able to maintain stability.
Yeah.
It does look a lot like there's a very, very short section of the Pine Mountain Trail that has kind of a similar terrain to it. The difference being there's a fairly well-worn path that kind of weaves through the rocks. Mm-hmm. And I didn't see that in that video. It was more like you had to kind of pick your path across the rocks.
You do. And you can generally see where they've got trail markers. But you kind of have to pick your path. There are some parts that are fairly clear, and then some parts that are just it's some rocks that I'm walking over. So I don't remember being confused at any point in time, but just knowing that I was like maybe the next 20 yards, I'm like, it's undefined which way I'm going, so you go the easiest way possible, and then there's like a section where like that's definitely the trail and so forth.
So were you wearing your Nike shoes for that particular hike?
No, that was the last hike I did in my Merrells, and towards the end of both days, I was just I had hot toes, and I think the Ultras that I have now would be much better suited for it.
Yeah, looking at it, I could see where I might actually prefer something like the Merrells just for the feel under the sole, but I would probably, it's one of the few times that I think I would elect to wear the Zero shoes that I have, even though they're not necessarily designed for it, because I could feel underfoot better with those than I could with any of the other shoes that I have.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. The Merrells that I had were the hiking boots, not the vapor gloves. So I realized I have both of those.
Yeah, I assumed, though I guess we should clarify for anybody listening. But I might even consider the vapor gloves for that particular stretch, just because it and the Zeros both afford a lot more feel of the terrain underfoot than anything else that I've got.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I also tend to not like an overly thick-soled hiking boot anyway, which was part of why I, looked at Zero and the Zero Drop Merrells and other variants in the first place. But I still haven't settled on one that I would actually enjoy hiking in for a long period of time. Yeah,
it's for me the Ultras. They've so far they've satisfied every problem. They've become a solution for every problem I've had and satisfied every need that I've had. So I'm a fan, and my only complaint would be they do make a mid height trail runner, so they kind of look like a hiking boot, and the waterproof one comes in the mid as well, but it doesn't it's not waterproof any higher than the standard low cut trail runner. It's the way the tongue separates from the rest of the shoe would allow water in at the same spot. So I feel like that sort of defeats the purpose of a mid. I'm sure like some people like the mid just because it's higher up and keep things out of your out from around your ankle, and you can lace it tighter for a little bit more stability on your ankle. But I was like, I'd also want the waterproofness to go that high as well. The Merrell boots that I have, they are waterproof. The way to get, water gets in if it spills over the top. So theoretically, I can stand, in water that's deeper than my ankles, and it doesn't get wet. I've actually, tested that, and it works. So I would have liked to have the same feature in the mids from Ultra as well.
Makes sense. I know historically I guess anecdotal wisdom of anything mid or higher was really geared more toward ankle stability than anything else. That generally you would compare the shoe based on the low rise, and then if you wanted to be able to lace something higher or provide that little more stiffness around the ankle, that's what you would go with the mid or high rise for. Yeah.
So I was looking at the notes today, and I saw you've been playing around with the HomePod Mini. I know we were gonna. It was in the notes from last week, but I saw a few additional notes.
I have. I originally ordered one, and then a couple of weeks later, I thought, well, I know I'm going to want to try this, so let me go ahead and order a second, and that way it can get here whenever it does. And one by itself is enjoyable enough for my use. The issue that I had with having just one is the same issue that I have with any single speaker that you're trying to play something out of. It very clearly sounds like a single speaker playing audio somewhere in the room. And adding a second and making it a stereo pair really changes the audio landscape to make it feel like it's just coming from everywhere in the room instead of that single source. Maybe I should back up slightly. So my use case is I wanted to theoretically replace the sound bar that I have in the office because that room is used more than it used to be with working from home. And I've never liked the sound bar in the first place. 1, from a space perspective, 2, from a sound perspective, and 3, I just don't like sound bars. So the HomePod seemed like it might be a good fit, but I couldn't justify a HomePod for the office. When the HomePod Mini was introduced, it seemed like that might be the answer to my general issue. And so I went ahead and ordered one after some deliberation. So it was 2 or 3 weeks after initial deliveries across the early adopters. And the first one impressed me enough that I thought, okay, maybe ordering the second one and having it arrive isn't such a bad idea after all. And I added the notes last week, and then the second one showed up, and so I was able to update the notes. And I would not say that it is a phenomenal sounding speaker by any means. It definitely sounds better than the soundbar as a stereo pair. By itself, it sounds like any portable Bluetooth speaker that you would want to pick up and use just for playing audio in a room.
Is the Mini portable? I didn't think it was.
It's not. I mean, you have to plug it into power. The point that I'm kind of emphasizing is that by itself, a single HomePod Mini, you might as well just buy a Bluetooth speaker. It's not really any better. Maybe a little bit for audio reproduction, but not to the point where I would say it's worth investing in unless you just want a smart speaker.
For $200 as a stereo pair, how does that feel?
That starts to feel much better. So the soundbar that I'm comparing to is a Sony, I think the model number is HN1 or something along those lines. I didn't look it up, so don't necessarily take that as standard or fact. But at the time, it was a top-of-the-line Sony soundbar. And I had picked it up because I had a receiver that was hit by lightning, and I didn't really know what I wanted to replace it with, and thought, all right, well, this will get me by for the short term. And a couple of weeks in, I thought, oh, God, this sounds horrible. I can't deal with it. I'm going to replace it. And I /moved the soundbar into the office with the spare TV that was pretty much never used at that time. Fast forward to March/April of this year, and when we're spending a lot more time at home, and we finally get the office set up, and I get it working for me for work in general, and thought I would finally get the TV usable for other purposes as well. Hooked up the soundbar in there, and it did its job. It's not like it's a just horrible thing. It's just not good for what I wanted, day-to-day entertainment-wise. But it is lacking quite a bit. And anybody that's ever tried a soundbar, sure, your experience may be that it's great compared to a TV speaker, but that's a pretty low threshold to pass. So a stereo pair of HomePod Minis sounds better than the soundbar by far, with a caveat. Unless you are using the Apple TV and doing AirPlay to that stereo pair, there is no way to have audio coming out of it for anything other than whatever content can be done that way off the Apple TV. So in a primary entertainment space, if you have anything that you use other than just an Apple TV, don't even consider it. If all you use is an Apple TV, consider a pair of HomePods, not the HomePod Minis, because I'm pretty sure, based on everything that I've read and understood, it will be a phenomenal experience compared to what you're used to. That said, if you have a secondary viewing area and you want good quality audio reproduction, the HomePod Minis as a stereo pair works very well. It comes out to be the same price as that Sony soundbar, drastically smaller, and adds some level of smart functionality, however smart you consider Siri to be, which is still a work in progress at best. However, I will say that I have not had any issues whatsoever activating the very limited number of HomeKit automations that I have set up for the office using the Siri catchphrase. So for the first time ever, Siri has worked well for me. But the big thing to notice there is that I only have a couple of basic automations set up for controlling lights based on whether I want a lot of light, a little bit of light, or no light in the office at the time that I'm in there.
That makes sense. And this sort of workaround with AirPlay to a Mac Mini is not going to be a solution for most people.
Well, I don't have AirPlay going to the Mini. The AirPlay is direct to the HomePod Mini stereo pair.
Oh.
The issue that I have
from any device?
Yeah, from the phone I can go straight to it via AirPlay. The reason I put that in there, the part that I don't like, if you have a pair of HomePods, not HomePod Minis, and you have an Apple TV 4K, you can tell the Apple TV 4K to have its default output device be the pair of HomePods, the big ones. But there is no mechanism that allows you to put the HomePod 4K or the Apple TV 4K or the Apple TV 4th Gen non-4K to have its default output be a stereo pair of HomePod Minis. To me, that's a big oversight. The only way to do the output to the HomePod Minis is via AirPlay, but you can do it directly from the Apple TV.
See, I don't think that, based on a number of things that Apple has been doing, I wouldn't say that's an oversight. I think that's purposeful. It's bad. I think it's a mistake, but I don't think it's an oversight. It's.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like I follow that train of logic, and it definitely seems like the kind of thing that you would say, well, yeah, if you have a pair of HomePods, you're wanting to set up an entertainment system and have it go to these and do the Dolby Atmos reproduction and everything else. The HomePod Mini doesn't get any of those features, so I can understand not having that, but it still seems like it's a ridiculous shortcoming in some aspect that I can't just set a pair of HomePod Minis, or a stereo pair of HomePod Minis as the default output device of any generation of Apple TV.
Exactly, including the first generation Apple TV. Maybe not the first generation because it runs its own OS. It doesn't run a variant of iOS. So maybe not that, or maybe even I don't know. At least the last few generations, especially since the current generation hasn't been updated for quite some time. So if you look at the iPhone, it doesn't make any sense why you don't have this feature set on all of the Apple TVs that can technically support it, that have the hardware to support it. Now, there might be some hardware things that don't support it, but I've got to imagine it's at least all the current model Apple TVs should support this. Because, and I give the example of the iPhone line, it's because if you have the iPhone 12 Pro and you have the iPhone 12 and the iPhone SE, and really between the iPhone 12 and 12 Pro, there's not a lot of differences. Like, you could very easily say, yeah, I'll get the iPhone 12, and the only reason to go to the iPhone 12 Pro is for a limited number of features that are Pro features, and slightly nicer sides if you like stainless steel sides, or a particular color. But for all intents and purposes, the iPhone 12 and the iPhone 12 Pro are really similar. Like, they all have the same great screen. They all have the same chipset inside. They all have the same speeds. It's really a few really sort of pro level things that are different between the two, and it baffles me that you have an iPod Mini and a HomePod Mini and a HomePod that don't support certain features that you would expect to support among the Apple ecosystem. And I don't like that. Yeah, it's bothersome to me. There's a number of other things that have become bothersome to me, and this week, especially with the AirPods Max. But yeah, it feels like there are two different thought processes for products in Apple right now.
That sounds eerily similar to a comment that I heard on the most recent ATP episode. Let's go ahead into the AirPods Max, because I didn't really have anything else on the HomePod Mini other than a stereo pair. It sounds really good. I enjoy it. I like it for my use case in the office. It can allow me to remove the soundbar whenever I'm not lazy enough to just leave it, hooked up and anchored to the wall, since it involves me, doing a couple of things more than just grabbing it and chunking it out into the yard. But overall, I'm happy with a stereo pair of HomePod Minis in the office. And that's, I guess, for anybody that listens, it's a relatively small room. Think normal bedroom size. It works really well. I have no complaints whatsoever. Is it worth it if you really want good quality audio in a living room? No. That is, you should not be looking at the HomePod Mini for that. Do I think I want to add the HomePod Mini to another room? I can see the benefit. I don't care for it because in any other room, I'm just going to grab the phone and initiate whatever automation I have set up in HomeKit anyway. So its use for me is limited to that room, but I am happy with the solution. And that's kind of a very short summary of how I feel about the HomePod Mini in general at this point in time.
Yeah, that seems pretty fair. The HomePod Mini doesn't interest me for a number of reasons. I feel like it might be nice to have in a bedroom, like one on each nightstand to have as a stereo pair, and that might be a nice way to have a little bit of music in the bedroom, and because I can see how like I'd always want to have that ability in my bedroom, but I have an Ultimate Ears Mega Boom, and I really like it, and it was $300, but a couple of things that it's got for the size speaker it's got decently good sound. And I'm always surprised by how good the sound is for how small the speaker is. But something that it has, it's portable. It's got a battery, and it is water resistant. It's got one of the IP ratings where basically 30 minutes, probably 1 meter for 30 minutes, and it's safe. So like I can take it kayaking. Like I can, it can fall in the water and it's not a problem. It doesn't stop. So right now, something like the HomePod Mini isn't in my, if I was gifted a couple of them, yes, I know exactly where I'd put them, but it's not something I'm looking to get because I've got this other Bluetooth speaker. It doesn't have any support, it doesn't have any audio support or voice command support, and it's not something I'm looking for in my life. I don't really like using Siri, and I have a thermostat that has Alexa, and I don't know how to turn it off. I want it to be off. So that being said, it's just one of those things where I could see a use case for HomePod Minis, but I'm not compelled to it at the moment. So I wanted to want the AirPods Max, but everything I've heard about them, well, what I put in the notes was a bit hyperbolic, but so much that I've heard about them disappoints me, not because I think that it's bad, but just because it's not the product that I wanted it to be. And basically I wanted it to be the thing that already exists. I just wanted the Apple version of it, and they've made something that's a little bit different than what currently exists. So,
well, I know in the notes you mentioned a complaint about why they continue to release things with a lightning connector.
Yeah, Renee Ritchie put forth an idea about this, and once I heard it, I was like, sadly, that's probably the most likely case. And he was talking about this was in reference to lightning connectors on the iPhone. And because there was a rumor that the iPhone was not going to have, or the iPhone might not have any connector at all and be all wireless charging. But, we got one with a lightning connector, and USB-C is, glaringly absent from the iPhone lineup. And the hypothesis that Rene Ritchie put forth was that Apple makes a lot of money on the MFI program made for iPod. The little badge that you see from decades ago. You could get a device that had a 40-pin connector, and you knew it was going to work with your iPod because it had a little made for iPod badge. Well, Apple gets a lot of money for that badge being on somebody's product, and it means that the company that manufactures the product, designed to manufacture the product, follow a set of guidelines that Apple's put forth for them, so that they can say that, so that your device will work with, so that the device that they're selling you will work with the Apple device that you have. Right now, since Lightning is proprietary, companies are having to pay the MFI tax to Apple to make their devices work with iPhones and iPads. And if the Lightning connector goes away and is replaced with the USB-C, that MFI money goes away largely, because you've got to imagine that the biggest source of MFI money is iPhones. And if it's replaced with USB-C, then that revenue stream disappears. And so now I don't think we'll see USB-C on a lot of things that have had Lightning connectors for that reason. It makes sense to me.
Yeah, I've heard that argument a number of times, and I've also heard a counter-argument that I find compelling, which is think about what percentage of Apple's revenue could be related to MFI, licensing, and think about what that means in general if it were to go away. And even the high-end estimates just don't put it that far up as far as percentage goes.
Uh-oh. If you can hear me, I cannot hear you.
What about now?
Oh, I can hear you now.
Okay, so I got no indication that anything changed. I just leaned forward again.
Weird.
I'm going to chalk this up to Big Sur related incompatibilities or something.
Okay.
But what I was saying is I've also heard the counter argument that let's just say that you account for MFI revenue being 5 million, 10 million, pick a number. Where does that sit in relation to the overall percentage of Apple revenue? And it's still just not that big.
Well, would you think that MFI revenue is larger than, let's say, AirPod revenue?
And no, I would think that AirPod revenue is significantly larger than MFI revenue.
Okay, because I saw the numbers for AirPod revenue, which is it's a company by itself. Like it was great. It was Charter it's a biweekly email that where they send some charts out with interesting data, and they showed Apple's AirPod revenue is like $6.7 billion. And they compared it to Spotify, the entire company of Spotify, which is $6.9 billion.
Well, it's like for a long time, iPhone as an entity has been larger than almost every other North American business. Yeah.
It's like the Mac itself is like a hugely profitable business, and it's just it's a much smaller portion of Apple's entire revenue. But regardless, what the percentage of revenue from the MFI program is a small percentage, or maybe even a fraction of a percentage from an Apple's entire revenue stream. But I still think they don't want to let it go, and I don't think it's like a greedy thing. It's like, this is our business. We aren't going to let it go for as long as possible. It's like they have a fiduciary responsibility to their investors.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, it's kind of tied into a lot of the arguments that we've heard about App Store revenue as well, where, you take every percentage point you can get until you have to make a change. And what constitutes having to make a change?
Right. So I think that And, it might be like nostalgia or romanticizing the past, but the iPod Mini at the time that the day before the Nano was released was the best-selling iPod Apple had ever released. And they discontinued it and released the iPod Nano. Because they didn't want, they thought this is a better product and we want everybody in this market to have this better product. And now it feels like you don't see that kind of bravery. I don't know. I feel like there are some missing gaps that would serve customers better. One of them being, I think we're to a point where USB-C, something that they were hugely involved in developing, should be on the iPhones. It should be on the AirPod case. It should be on all of the iPads, and it's not. And the reason I think it should be on all of the devices is because it's convenient. It would be so nice to plug in my, even if it doesn't take advantage of the 85-watt adapter that I have for my MacBook Pro, I'd like to just be able to plug it in and it charge, and could theoretically carry around just one brick and one cable. So I feel like it's an unquantifiable benefit to the product line to start implementing USB-C. It's in all of the MacBook Pros. It's on all of the current desktops. It's not the only thing on the current desktops, but it's the only thing on the MacBook Pros. It's on the iPad. I think it would be beneficial. I don't know.
I certainly see the advantages. The biggest thing that I always think back to is just the sheer backlash against changing from the 30-pin connector to Lightning in the first place. And from a court of public opinion, changing it yet again when people are relying on these different connectors for plugging it into cars or speakers or whatever, you name it, whatever they have decided to use as a peripheral. I just feel like after the 30-pin to Lightning transition, Apple's just gun shy on changing it.
That could be, but the Lightning connector was such a good connector. When it came out, it was a great connector, and I wish they could have made USB-C the same connector as a Lightning connector. I like the Lightning connector better than the USB-C connector. But the USB-C connector is definitely better than all the previous USB connectors. I mean, just looking at the list of, you think, oh, there's just a few USB connectors. No, there's USB is a lot messier than it appears to be. But, and it's even with USB-C, it's still quite messy. Or not messy, but nuanced perhaps. But it's just, I know people that have switched from Android to iPhone, and they both are like, wait, what? I have to have another cable? I used to use this USB-C. I used to have the one USB-C cable. And I'm like, I'm sort of envious of that. Not enough to get an Android.
Yeah, I still just kind of go back to, I think the public outcry over having to change at all has made Apple leery of making a change on the iPhone because of how big it is. I mean, the iPad arguably is a much easier way to transition to current tech because it's a smaller installed customer base, and it's a customer base that's more willing to adapt, I think, because it's not their everyday, all-day device.
I'd agree.
Obviously, there are some exceptions, but generally speaking, I just don't see iPad aficionados being opposed to making a change. Just like on the Mac, even though a lot of us have grumbled about going from a myriad of different ports to nothing but USB-C, once we made the transition, we kind of quit grumbling. It was like, all right, well, I see the benefits. It's a painful transition because of having to buy adapters or other things to kind of be a stopgap measure until you can kind of transition everything to native USB-C connectivity. But its merits are easily visible, whereas on the phone, the general majority doesn't think of it as a computing device still. They still think of it as a phone, and there should be ubiquitous access to a charger, and what's out there that's easily available is Lightning or wireless at this point. But that's still, I still look at Qi charging in the realm of early adopters more so than the vast majority of end users.
I think what will really indicate where Apple is if they take away the Lightning port and don't replace it with a USB-C, that will be indicative of their intentions. Because I get like the Lightning port on the iPhone is for almost all users only used for charging. I'm sure there's some audio use, probably more audio use than connecting to a computer for syncing. But if all the ports go away, I know the story will be like it's more, it's better sealed, but I don't buy that. I won't buy that explanation. I don't find that explanation believable. But if they, so time will tell if the iPhone never gets USB-C and goes to wireless charging only. I will be highly disappointed.
See, I kind of like the idea of never having to worry about a cable.
But as it is, you don't have to worry about a cable. Like as soon as they put one, as soon as the iPhone, was the iPhone 7 or the iPhone 10, where they iPhone 10 was the first one with wireless charging, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so as soon as
the 10/8 era.
Yeah. So as soon as the 10 was released, you didn't have to worry about a cable at all. Because at that point you can do wireless charging for everything. So you can have that world today.
Except that I'm still one of those people who have a developer account and prefer to have a local backup instead of restoring from iCloud when I'm playing with betas.
But you can do that over Wi-Fi.
I can, but I don't feel that I have a good quality version of that that's not going to take me a day to
that's fair.
Transfer data over Wi-Fi back and forth to the device.
That's fair, but Lightning is still USB 2 speeds?
I think so.
Yeah.
I know it does not take full advantage of USB 3, but I don't know if there's some difference between what it's capable of and the actual USB 3 spec.
I'm doing a quick look so that we don't have to have follow-up on this next week.
Well, it's not like we would actually do the follow-up anyway.
I don't know. I feel like my argument's valid. I feel like the holding on to the argument for holding on to Lightning and being opposed to another connector change is valid as well. So it's whether or not the iPhone gets USB-C in the future or it goes to wireless only. Like I wanted to get USB-C. I most of the time I charge mine wirelessly, but I would like to be able to plug it in.
Yeah, I see the future being wireless only. I see there being a iteration of wireless technology that is more than capable of transmitting between phone and computer at gigabit plus speeds consistently and without packet loss errors, et cetera, that drag that down quite a bit. And I'm okay with that. Like I would love to be able to never think about what type of cable will I pack in a bag as a precaution and just know that even in whatever restore mode, if worse comes to worse, I could still connect to it wirelessly. I think that's kind of the problem more so than the cable itself.
Yeah. So a quick real-time follow-up and an article that Mashable wrote in 2017 posted that the iPhone 7 had a transfer speed of 480 megabits per second, which is USB 3.0.
All right. Well, I guess we were wrong then. It sure doesn't seem like it transfers at those type of speeds wirelessly.
Yeah, there could be, there's probably other stuff going on in the background.
Well, and I'm sure it's a large part of wireless transmission is severely hampered based on number of files that it's attempting to transfer as well, not just pure file size.
Right.
And it wouldn't surprise me if it's just a large number of files that is making it seem slower as opposed to the actual transfer speed.
Yeah. It's, typical, data in has to be managed, data transfers have to be managed a certain way, and certain data transfers take longer than others based on various variables. But yeah, that was kind of the main sort of like, I use the AirPods Max to bitch about just lightning connectors in general. Like the idea of the lightning connector on the mouse and the keyboard, I don't care about at all. And, basically the nature of that product is such that you put it in a spot and it pretty much always stays in that spot. And that's probably why I don't care about it. But there were a few other things I didn't like about the AirPods Max as well. The case.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of discussion about the case, and I don't understand where the case was even designed or originated from. It doesn't seem to fit anything practical at all anywhere.
It's not a case. It's it's I don't know what it is. I don't know why it's there.
Well, it is a case in a sense. You do put the AirPods Max in it in some way, even if it's not fully enclosed.
I mean, yes, it is a case.
Well, and obviously I'm just playing devil's advocate at this point.
Right.
Because
it's an impractical case.
It's more of a, I lost the word. It's more of an impractical covering than it is a case.
Really, I would really have liked to seen them make them in various sorts of plaid so that we could call them the AirPods Max kilt. But I gotta say, the kilt offers more utility than that case. It's like one of those things that you're gonna need a third-party case. And yeah, the case is, I think the case is a huge mistake. I think they could have made a really cool case that would, properly protect those headphones. I think that the colors, I don't like any of the colors except for the white ones and the black ones, but I don't care. That's fine. Those are the colors they went with. Somebody's going to like those colors, but I think if I was going to buy a pair, I'd definitely buy a pair of white ones. I think the white ones would be cool. I'd be concerned that they would get dingy over time, but Apple's really good with materials, so it would be worth seeing whether or not they do or do not get dingy. But a lot of that is, I like the Apple white aesthetic from days long ago, and so I like they do have a white pair. I think it's cool that the ear pads can be replaced pretty easily. They have magnetic connections for those. I thought that was pretty cool, but it's ultimately just not the product I wanted it to be. It's more expensive than I wanted it to be, and it doesn't really serve a purpose I have. And if maybe it was like $150 less expensive, so that it was like a $400 pair of headphones and it came with a proper case, I might consider that. But I don't know. I was excited about it. I honestly had like one of the Beats Studio in mind, but I was wanting Apple. When Apple bought Beats, I was wanting them to make an over-ear headphone, because at the end of the day, Apple ends up makes audio products that I like because I like the way they have them tuned. And Beats has way too much bass for me, and I think a set of headphones from them would be great, and this just was not the product I wanted it to be. But I think I've said that enough times since it was released and today.
Yeah, the more that I read and hear about them, I think they're an interesting product. They're just not fulfilling a need that I have at this time. And I think a second or third generation might be very appealing depending on what they do with it. But I also realize I tend to prefer earbuds over over-ear earphones in the first place. The only time I use over-ears are when we're recording. Actually, I use my AirPods Pro for everything else. And I like them. They're comfortable, they serve their purpose, they sound decent, and they're half the price. So my current needs just don't dictate having an over-ear, because I don't find them comfortable long enough to want to wear them. Whereas the in-ear, I don't typically notice as long as I find a pair that is comfortable up front. And that's historically just been my differentiator. Either they're comfortable or they're not. And if they're comfortable, I can wear them indefinitely. If they're not, I just won't buy them or return them or throw them away. Take your pick. But I have never found a pair of over-ears to be comfortable long enough to want to wear them more than maybe a couple of hours at a time. And that's pushing limits.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm the same way. I think maybe the most comfortable ones that I wore are the Bose QC3s, but they're like the on-ear, not the around-the-ear headphones. I like them a lot. I mean, I'm certainly not an audiophile. They sound better than the Beats. They were more comfortable than the Beats on-ear headphones, because I think I owned. Yeah, at some point in time, I had various different Beats headphones. I had the on-ears and the over-the-ears. I even had the Monster Beat ones, the very first ones that were manufactured by Monster, and not any of them were great for music, just because of how much bass or how tuned for bass they were. I actually ended up using before AirPods. I ended up using a pair of Etymotic headphones, and I can't remember the model off the top of my head. And they were really good because they isolated all of the noise out from the world around, and they were kind of weird to put in, but they were. I was living in New York at the time, and they were great down in the subways. I could. It just blocked out all of the loud train noises and so forth. But I expect the AirPods Pro to be a lot like that. They're similarly priced to the AirPods Pro, or at least the middle range models that they have are similarly priced to the AirPods Pro. So I would get AirPods Pro before I got AirPods Max, but I've got just the AirPods, and really that suits my needs for headphones for most things. That's what I'm going to use. I have another pair of wireless headphones that I got before there's ever AirPods for the gym. I would never use AirPods at the gym because they would fall out of my ears. I know for some people they haven't had, they've had great luck with them, but I also don't want to like sweat and destroy them in that way. They're not made for that.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that. So
you've got the AirPods Pro, which is different. They're more likely to stay in your head, and so like that argument probably wouldn't work anymore.
Well, and the only reason I have the AirPods Pro is because I killed my original set of AirPods because of sweating and not paying attention to the fact that there is no IP rating on the original AirPods.
No. Do the AirPods Pro?
Yeah, so the original AirPods, I still have them. The AirPods themselves work, but I killed the case.
Oh yeah, you were telling me about this.
Yeah, so I didn't pay attention to it. I didn't think about it. It just, was not at the forefront of my mind. But I would wear the AirPods when I would do a jog or a row, and I would obviously sweat. And I just put the AirPods back in the case. And come to find out, that's a very easy way to kill the charging capabilities of your AirPods case. So instead of replacing my AirPods with just another set of AirPods, I decided I would spend a little bit extra and get the AirPods Pro. And I actually do like them better. I think they feel better. I think they sound better. A lot of that has to do with the fact that there are tips instead of it just being the hard plastic housing. But there is also I don't remember what level, but there is a limited IP rating on the AirPods Pro that is not present on the AirPods. That said, because of the lesson I learned with the original AirPods, even with the AirPods Pro, when I take them out of my ears after doing any type of cardio, I still wipe them off with just a microfiber cloth real quick just to make sure they're dry before I put them in the charging case. And I think that's the guidance from Apple as well, because I think the AirPods Pro themselves have an IP rating, but the case still does not play well with anything. So I think the guidance is to dry them off or make sure they're dry before you put them in the case regardless. But I've done that because I killed the original AirPods case that I had. But I have been happy with the AirPods Pro. Like they have definitely delivered from a comfort and use perspective more so than the original AirPods did. So in a way, I'm happy I was forced to kind of look at options. I could have just bought another pair of AirPods. Probably should have, because they suited my purposes perfectly well as also. But I like the fact that I have a pair of AirPods Pro, and the noise canceling features are really nice to have.
Yeah, I'm interested. I've been interested in trying those out, but I'd gotten my AirPods pretty soon. I don't know when the AirPods Pro released, but I think it was in the same year. I got it right. I got the AirPods when the wireless charging case was released, and I got the wireless charging case. It's like one of the only packages that references the AirPods Max, whatever, the AirPad, that never got released. So I have that packaging.
Yeah, hold on to that. It might be able to sell it later for profit.
Yeah. So, yeah. So it's, I think another thing, and I'm always reminded of this from listening to ATP, but because they went on the episode they released recently, they talk about a gap in the market with their displays. And I've always thought that when they took away when they stopped selling the Thunderbolt display, and then they replaced it with the LG display, so no display of their own, and then they said they were going to release a display. I got real excited, and then they released the Apple Pro Display XDR and nothing else. I guess it feels like that again with the AirPods Max. It's like, that's cool, AirPods Max. That's cool. It's definitely not for me. It's definitely not something I want to pay for this sort of thing. It's not the product I wanted, it's not the product I wanted you to release. It feels like the Apple display again. Because I have Apple displays. I like Apple displays. I remember Apple displays were more expensive than, everybody else's display for the most part. But I was happy to pay the premium for an Apple display because there were things that I got out of it that the integration was great. And like right now on my desk, I have a Thunderbolt display sitting right here, and I use it from time to time, but it's getting harder and harder to use because it's not Retina. The AirPods Max being released, them releasing the AirPods Max as a product that wasn't the product that I wanted, reminded me of the displays being released, and it wasn't a product that I wanted, not a product for me.
Yeah, I've just finished the same episode you were referencing, and the same idea kind of has been at the forefront of my mind, that there's a quote-unquote low end that is serviced relatively well, and there's a high end that is now serviced relatively well, but there's a middle ground that seems abandoned, and I don't know if it's intentional or if it is we really need to rethink how we can service this middle ground, because we had to take resources away to figure out how to service the high end again, because that was obviously lost for a while as well.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that. And time will tell. That's the that might be the story that's playing out, and that's okay. And I don't want the high end, like the way that they're servicing the high end, I think is really good, and I don't want that to go away. Like, a lot of innovations come from catering to the niche high end customers, and the Mac Pro is a niche product. And it's a great product. I wish, not only do I don't have a need for it. I wish I had a need for it, but there's no, I can't think of anything that I would do that would give me a need for that. The old, not the cylindrical Mac Pro, but the tower before that I could have had a use for. There was a lot of, and it was based on a world where most hard drives were rotational hard drives. Like, I had a lot of ideas of how I would use one of those, but that is no longer the world we live in. Like, my needs have changed. How I store data has changed. And so that that device doesn't fit in a use case that I would want to force myself to use. So I have no need for a Mac Pro or the Pro Display XDR, but I'm glad they exist because the technologies developed there are going to some of them are going to find themselves in other Apple products. And like you said, this middle ground is not being serviced. And if the story turns out to be is like we had to divert resources into this high-end product, this extreme over here, and we're making sure that we are servicing the entry-level sort of thing, or the low end. I don't like calling it the low end because I don't or entry level. It just sounds.
Well, it's even worse now with the M1 because entry level beats out the quote unquote pro desk MacBook that I have sitting in front of me by a long shot. Right.
And there might be a lot that was diverted into developing those, and so yeah, that's a thing, and I'm just waiting and hoping to see that they fill in and that they service well, like they have the right product through all for all use cases. It's not like they haven't been putting 5K displays inside of machines. Like they know how to do that. Like just like was said by other folks, like it's something they've been doing for years with the iMac. So it's not a thing they can't do. It's certainly a thing they can do. They just haven't wanted to do it, and hopefully we'll see them, or they wanted to do other things. They haven't prioritized it, that's for sure. So I'm hoping it will become enough of a priority that we'll see a $1,000, 27-inch to 5K display from Apple, and basically an iMac without the iMac. So I would use that, and I think it would be great. The other thing it's like that is missing, I think, is like, I know this might seem crazy, but why doesn't why doesn't Apple sell a desktop keyboard with a touch bar? I feel like that is a product that's missing. And if everyone had a touch bar, or everyone could get a touch bar, maybe we'd see better touch bar support. So far, it's not going away. So let's do something with it. I've gotten just enough taste and like meaningful use out of the touch bar that I want more of it.
Yeah, I don't really understand the story with the touch bar. It feels like one of those things where it was a great demo and they said, hey, this is an example of how you can use it. And then nobody decided to work with that to make it better. And so it's just kind of hung in limbo since. And that's the best way I can think to describe it. Because I know I certainly don't use it much, but I don't have an aversion to it like others do. I just wish it was more useful because it seems neat. I just don't have a reason to use it more. And that, I think, is the big problem that Apple has, is they haven't sold the reason to try to use it. They've just said, hey, here's this great piece of tech. Run with it.
Yeah. They've incorporated it into a number of their things and a number of their applications, and it's nice. But just the one use case of muting and unmuting myself on a call is just, that button always being there is great. It feels very much like that is, when Steve Jobs announced the original iPhone, it's like there's no keyboard. We can control, a software keyboard is something that means we can change the keyboard to suit whatever need you have, and the touch bar could be that. It just it got a bad start, and then it's had no support. I really think they should have left the escape key and the function keys in a row there. Just instead of replacing that top row of keys, just added it to above the top row of keys. I think there was a way to have done that, and I think that would have been a better introduction. And a better introduction might have led to better support for it, along with making it available for the desktop as well. I can understand various reasons why they wouldn't do that, or justifications for not doing that. But at this point, it's not been given the best possible start and therefore may always remain a non-starter.
Well, and I think the big thing is that Apple hasn't changed anything about it other than reintroducing a regular escape key on the newer iterations. And so if you haven't shown, hey, here's something else you can do, or really provided any kind of interest in it other than continuing to provide it, there's just not a reason to explore its capabilities.
Yeah. It was not set up for success. But I feel like that's all the bitching I need to do about Apple right now. And, again, it's just, I want you to make the things that I want.
As we all do. So it's understandable.
Yeah.
So the other two topics,
yeah.
I think we can just blow through really quick. Our last conversation talking about locations had me thinking about one of the problems that I have for creative endeavors, not related to, the general hiking and outdoor activity crowd, but just creative endeavors in general, is it would be nice to be able to find just random, abandoned, accessible locations that provide a backdrop for whatever that particular creative endeavor is. And it's something that I've never found easy to identify or locate. It seems like it's just drive around until you happen to find one and hope you're not trespassing. But I thought it was an interesting enough anecdote to just kind of add in and at least see if your thoughts had ever even driven toward that kind of use case or anything came to mind from it.
So this year I got really interested in ghost towns. And I'll back up and say, I think that kind of misses the point that you were intending to make, perhaps. I actually drive by the old Caraway Hospital pretty often to go visit my girlfriend. And it's abandoned. I recently saw pictures of it from the inside. Somebody had gone in and posted some pictures of it. I'm in a Facebook group called Forgotten Alabama, and it's folks just posting pictures of things that are now abandoned all around the state, and it's pretty cool. But somebody had recently posted pictures of that empty hospital. It was supposed to be demolished in April, but it's still standing up, so I'm not sure what's going on with it. There may be some they're waiting for permits to come through. Everything's slowed down with COVID, and so maybe the permits that they all were expecting to have before the end of April are still being processed, and there's no reason to spend money demolishing a building if you don't know that you can build there once it's demolished. So I get that. Another one that I got a chance to visit was Century Plaza Mall in Eastlake. A few years ago, the Botanical Gardens had their plant sale in the old Sears space in that mall, and I got to sort of crane my head around and look into the mall and see what the abandoned mall has become, and that was pretty interesting. And I don't know, I think it was sometime last year, somebody sent an email in a group text that I'm in talking about this guy who bought a ghost town in California. And I was like, oh yeah, that's cool, but I didn't really think much of it. And then in May or so, I came across this YouTube channel called Alone in My Ghost Town. And it turned out to be that same guy. It took me a few episodes before I put together that it was the same guy. But this guy who had made a fair amount of money running a hostel in Austin, Texas, bought a ghost town with a business partner, and he's been living out in this ghost town since March. So right before, I think he went right as things were, people in Seattle were getting infected with COVID-19. And he's been out in this ghost town in Cerro Gordo, California for the past 9 months. And it's a pretty cool ghost town. Is this the sort of direction you were intending to go with this topic?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, the general idea was just that finding them and being able to locate avenues for endeavors in general just has always been something that's difficult. The handful of places that I have stumbled across that have been abandoned, that have led themselves to, in my case, photographic endeavors, have been just luck of the draw that I happened to stumble across them with someone while exploring an area, and I'm certain we were trespassing. But finding those types of locations was kind of what I had in mind.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about Cerro Gordo because I find it fascinating. I think you'd find it fascinating as well. It's out in California, not too far from the Nevada border. It's actually the eastern side of the property comes into contact with Death Valley. So Death Valley National Park comes right up to this guy's property, and that's pretty cool. So on one side he's got Death Valley. On the other side he can see the mountains of Sequoia National Park, and he actually from the town you can see Mount Whitney, the tallest peak in the contiguous United States. So it's pretty cool. The city was founded in the 1860s. It was the primary source of silver in the state of California. They don't know if this is adjusted for dollars in 2020 or if it's dollars in 1870. Regardless, it's pretty significant. But they pulled out $500 million worth of silver. And if this mine town had not existed, Los Angeles as we know it would not exist. Los Angeles is got a lot of money came from Cerro Gordo to Los Angeles because by car it probably takes about 3 hours to drive to LA, but it was the closest port to the mines, and that was how they got silver out into a place where it could be shipped to various, for whatever you're doing with silver. A commodity like that, I know we use it for different things, and there's jewelry, but I don't know all the uses for silver, but LA would not exist in the way that it does now without that mine town. And then I think in the 1910s they found zinc deposits, and then it had another mining boom in the early 1900s, and then I think was basically a ghost town by the 1930s and has been a ghost town ever since.
It's interesting how any place that holds that level of significance can just all of a sudden, well, all of a sudden is not the best phrasing there. How any place that holds that type of significance in the development of a region can become completely uninhabited over the course of time.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of history there, and there's a lot that went on there, and now it's not even considered a city. Like, you can't find it on the map. Like, or rather, if you try to search for it as a destination, it doesn't exist in like Google Maps or Apple Maps. You have to like put in the coordinates to actually find that it was a town. So, and it makes sense why it's not on the map, because it's not actually a town. It's not a place you can go to in that regard. But it used to be, it made LA, among other things, because it wasn't the only thing that led to LA becoming a large city, but it certainly wouldn't have become the city that it is today without them.
So pivoting from that, the other one that you put in the notes was Cahaba. What similarities do you see between the two?
So it's great because Cahaba, Alabama was the capital of the state for 5 years, and now it's an abandoned ghost town. There are some buildings that still exist there. I think it's probably I can't remember, but it might be a historic site, and so it's not something that could be bought. But there's some fun ghost stories that come with Cahaba, Alabama. But it's another one of those towns that was in the 19th century. It was pivotal, or it was significant to the state, and it is no longer of any significance other than its history.
Yeah, I was going to summarize, but then you summarized it well. I don't know that I have anything to add to that.
I did want to say one other thing about Cerro Gordo before we moved on, but that made it as interesting as a ghost town, and that is that at its peak, they averaged about one murder per week, just because it was the Old West and miners were, maybe ornery. I don't know, but there was a lot of killing out there.
I was going to say my initial response to that was that seems high, but then I immediately thought, well, does that really seem high? And I was conflicted on whether that was a high count or not.
Yeah, it's either one murder a week or one murder a day. I don't know, but it was, I think a relatively lawless town, and it was, I think it sort of embodies the Old West.
That might be worthy of researching and follow up.
I'll definitely confirm that. Because we're talking about 52 murders a year versus 365 murders a year. Regardless, it's a fair amount.
Yeah, I mean, either way, it's still quite high for the time, if even for current standards. I mean, well, maybe not for current standards in some cities, but in general, like even 52 a year is high as far as murders go.
Well, when you consider the population of Cerro Gordo at its height was like 5,000 people, then, even 52 that's a lot.
Yeah, definitely. It certainly would surpass any percentage comparison of most, modern statistical comparisons of percentage of homicides per year.
Just a little real-time follow-up. It was one per week.
Yeah, that's still pretty high given the population density at the time.
Yeah, just the specific snippet I found, and I'm going to try to read this with my face still in the microphone, and that is, in its heyday, there was a murder a week in Cerro Gordo, an extraordinarily violent community of about 500 people. Silver miners slept on cots surrounded by sandbags stacked 4 feet high to protect themselves from stray bullets. In the late 1800s, an estimated 30 miners who had immigrated from China were buried in a mine shaft.
Yeah, so a population of 500 is drastically smaller than that original thought of 5,000, and that makes it an extremely violent town.
Yeah, that's like 10% of the population a year.
I would say lawless characterizes it well.
Yeah. Well, just the fact that they are sleeping with sandbags stacked around their cots just for stray bullet, like that says a lot right there.
Well, you could extrapolate from that slightly, and how different is that than sleeping with walls, however shoddily constructed, around us, thinking that they protect us from...
Right.
Same mindset.
Yeah, I can remember the first time I saw a round of Full Metal Jacket, and I was like, I didn't know anything about. I knew very little about firearms at the time. I still say I know very little about firearms, just a little bit more than then. But I asked, like, would you ever take that hunting? And, that question was met with laughter, and then the explanation as to why you wouldn't use it for hunting and so forth. And so yeah, it was. It's just thinking how readily accessible that kind of round is. The walls do nothing. They protect us more from the elements than anything else.
Yeah, it's a false sense of security unless you custom build a home to be bulletproof, and the issue is more compounded in the Southeast, I think, than most other places, because you have idiots, there's no nicer way to put it, who think that it is perfectly okay to shoot a firearm up into the air in celebration, and that bullet has to come down. And there have been plenty of reports over years of random bullets, coming through a roof, and in some cases fatalities, in some cases lucky misses. Not to put a downer on the whole episode, but
no. That was the only other thing, because I mentioned that Cahaba had I think it has a fun little ghost story, if I recall. It was in the church. There's a church that has a ghost, and the guy who currently lives in Cerro Gordo was asked about his opinion on ghosts, and initially, like, he always responded, I was like, yeah, I don't think there are ghosts. There's no ghost. And then he lived there for X amount of time. Like, pretty early on, he had an experience where now he's like, he's not saying there are ghosts, and he's not saying that he experienced a ghost, but he's like, he's no longer quite as skeptical as he once was, because one of the buildings on the property had a light on, and he saw a person in the window, and supposedly there's only one way in and out of that building, and it was padlocked, and there was nobody there. So he's just like, I'm not saying they're a ghost. I get a weird feeling here. That could be just me. But, you know, this happened, and I can't really explain it. He'll probably never be able to explain it, but he's just like, it happened. I can respect that kind of response.
I was going to say, it's a fairly pragmatic approach to it. You know, I can see that something happened. I can't explain it. So could say that I see this thing happen. I don't have an explanation for it, so I'm not going to rule anything out. I don't necessarily believe it or believe it is this thing, but it could be, so I'm not going to say no.
Yeah. That kind of makes me think, not for tonight, but that might lead into another topic for another day. And I'll put it in somewhere in the notes, and it can live in notes and bounce around from one note to the next as needed.
Well, it's like the next topic that I have really isn't a topic; it's just a statement. So it can pretty much move.
I saw it. And I was
let's
like,
explore
wow.
that.
No.
Well, I think let's add that to something where it's more relevant. I don't see any reason to go into a random statement that has nothing to do with the rest of the episode.
But it's our podcast, and we can do whatever we want.
It is, but it's literally just a sentence. I need to come up with more to make it worthy of being a topic.
That's fair.
So I think we've covered everything that was in the show for this evening, unless you had anything else you wanted to kind of button up before we move into after show.
No, that was it.
All right. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at untitled_hosts. Send us an email at untitled.hosts@gmail.com or follow the feed directly at theUntitledPodcast.com. You can also find all sorts of ways to contact Jesse at jthart.com. Thank you for listening. That's a wrap.
Yeah, so after the last recording we did, after we were done recording, macOS transitioned from light mode to dark mode. So it was like 12:48 at night, or in the morning. It was always tricky. 12:48 a.m. it transitioned from light to dark mode. And I was like, what the fuck?
Well, the whole point there is that there was at least a 4-hour window. Maybe not 4, that might be exaggerating, but at least a 3-hour window where it could have transitioned even while we were recording and didn't.
I think I've complained about this before. Transitioning from light mode to dark mode on iOS it's really good. Sometime after sunset or around sunset it transitions, and sometimes around sunrise it transitions, and I don't know why macOS is different.
I'm telling you, you need to adopt my approach. Just pick one on macOS.
I know. And, and I can go in and manually toggle it. I don't. I want it to work the way that I want it to work. And I don't see it's, if iOS was just as finicky, excuse me, if iOS was just as finicky, maybe I would care less. But because it works the way, it's not even the way I think it should work, but it works in a way that makes sense to me on iOS because it was there on iOS before it was on macOS. I'm accustomed to it working this way, so now I think this is how it should work. So Apple has told me this is how it should work, and then they're like, oh yeah, we don't make it work that way over here. I'm like, come on, guys. I think I'm more upset about the inconsistency than anything else.
Yeah, that was the point that I was thinking to make. It's more that it's at least a consistent experience on iOS, regardless of whether it works in a specifically logical or illogical way. It's just that it's it's consistent in how it works, and that's what you're missing.
Yeah, and I think it's actually logical how they have it working in iOS. It's like it's dark outside, it's dark on your phone. It's light outside, it's light on your phone. Give that to me for a Mac OS. The other day, I woke up my computer. It was on the weekend. It was like 10 o'clock in the morning. It was in dark mode, and it was in dark mode for like minutes before it turned to light mode. So it's just like, I should have opened it already and it been in light mode. Maybe that'll be fixed with an M1 Mac.
Maybe. As you were talking about it, it made me think of two potential culprits. One being the less location aware-ishness. I don't know of a better way to put it. The fact that the Mac does not have GPS capabilities and is relying on some level of Wi-Fi triangulation for location, device location, which is relatively good. So I don't think that's the issue, but it may be something to do with how often it updates, which I could see being solved by the lower power consumption of the M1. And so there may be some correlation between it just doesn't update its awareness of location as often on the Intel Macs versus what would be capable with the M1s or M2s, etc.
I'm looking at the settings on my phone because I wanted to confirm this. I don't even remember where the light and dark mode is set. I guess general.
Yeah, it's the display preferences.
Yeah. So in iOS, you can set a custom schedule and say at this hour, at this time, be light mode, be dark mode. So you can set it based on the clock. Like it only needs the clock. And if you set it, the other option you can is sunrise to sunset, or I think that's how they put it. So that's also the clock. And in macOS, it's just auto. There's no, I don't even know what auto means. It's a random auto.
Well, obviously it means whenever it decides to.
Right. I mean, yeah. So I don't like that it's different from iOS. iOS makes sense to me. It's I looked at the setting again. It's you can and when it's in dark mode, it'll be dark until sunrise. That makes sense, and it'll be light until sunset. So that's a good delimiter. And then you can also just say be dark at this time. You're in dark mode from this time to this time. So you can set in what hours you're in dark. So cool. macOS, you got nothing. Nothing at all. You have light, dark, and auto. And if you I just tested this. I've been in light mode for the whole time that we've been recording. I opened up system preferences and I put it in dark mode. It was in auto, and it was light mode auto. And then I put it in dark mode, and now it's in dark mode. And then I switched it back over to auto, and it's still in dark mode.
Yeah, like I said, whenever it feels the necessity to swap is what you get with macOS.
Yeah, it's yeah. I don't know. I don't know why it has to be different.
And
all it needs to do is look at the clock. It doesn't need to use like location services. It doesn't need to. It's like, yeah. There's a weather widget. The weather widget presumably will show me the sunrise and sunset, and the colors should reflect that.
Yeah, I'm certainly not arguing that it's correct. It's just that under the hood, doesn't the weather widget still use location to give you approximate forecast?
Probably. But it also knows that I'm in the time zone, and I don't know why that can't be built into the logic of, the auto setting in light and dark mode. Like it doesn't need the weather app to know. Like it's like if I have the time zone set to central, it can, at any point during the day when it wakes up in power nap mode, I don't know, at some point pull the data for the day is when the sunrise and the sunset are, and when I'm, and when it's going to be set to light and when it's going to be set to dark based on that. I don't think it doesn't have to be that complex.
Yeah, it should certainly be able to at least do it based on time and time zone, if nothing else. So I could see a 5 to 10 minute variant on the Mac being acceptable, but I mean,
maybe not even
yeah,
noticeable.
But I mean, a couple 3 hours. There's no real excuse for it.
Yeah, and I would say like at this point, it gets dark at like 5:30 or so. So it's like that was like almost 6 hours.
I wonder if there's some weird logic tied to it normally does it based on log in and log out, or wake up and sleep, and it's not expecting to change as you use it. I don't know how the feature was ever presented, but like, do you see the phone change as you use it, or is it as you sleep it and then wake it back up, and it's just that you use it often enough that you don't notice the delay?
No. There's been a number of times where I'm like using my phone, and I've seen it switch from light to dark. And then on Mac OS, I was using the computer at the time. That's how I knew exactly what time it was that it switched from light to dark. I was using it, and while I was using it, it switched to dark. And maybe this problem is solved in Big Sur, and once you're not having any problems with audio on Big Sur, this will be the feature that I switch to Big Sur for. I used Remote Desktop just now to look at my Mac Mini, and it was automatically in dark mode, and I was like, pretty sure I have it set to auto on that, and I went and looked, and it's set to auto, and I am gonna pay attention to the Mac Mini and maybe report back on that as follow-up next week.
Yeah, and I'd be curious to see if they fixed it. It definitely sounds like something that just is not working as it should in Catalina. And I can obviously sympathize with a lack of inconsistency driving someone nuts, because that bugs me as well. I just don't see it because I keep mine in dark mode.
I know. And it's really like, I like dark mode and I like light mode, and I like both of them for I like the aesthetic of both of them. And for a long time I worked solely in dark mode. Obviously I worked in light mode when there were no modes. It was just Mac OS was a lot of white in Mac OS, and then light mode was only a term once there was a dark mode. And when dark mode was available, I used that for a long time. Actually, when I can't remember what release it was that dark mode came with it. It might have been. Wow, I feel bad. I don't even know what was before Catalina.
I'm pretty sure it was Catalina. I know Catalina is where the light/dark wallpapers are very predominant in my memory.
What's the one before Catalina? Mojave. I think there was a dark mode in Mojave because they had the dynamic wallpapers in Mojave. That was the first one to have dynamic wallpapers.
Could be. I don't remember a lot about Mojave.
But Catalina, I remember now. Catalina was the one that had the first proper dark mode. There was a sort of faux dark mode in Mojave that just made the menu bar and I think the spotlight search dark when you brought it up, but it wasn't like a proper. Mojave had a dark mode that had dynamic wallpapers, but it wasn't a proper dark mode. Catalina had the first proper dark mode. And when I upgraded to Catalina, I used dark mode 100% of the time. And it was only, I think, sometime this year that I switched to auto, because I had auto on the phone, and I was like, let me do it on the Mac, because I like it. I like the way that it works on the phone, because I wanted to see both. But I will see if I'll just. I don't even need to know or see when it transitions. I'm just gonna look at my Mac Mini in the morning. If it's in light mode, I'll be like, okay, that's good. And then sometime after it's dark outside, look at it again. And if it's dark mode, I'm like, okay, that's good, and see if maybe it's a bit more consistent in Big Sur.
Yeah, the only thing that still sticks to my mind is it may be something that is redrawn when you connect to it as well. And so it may be a false sense of it being better, if that makes sense.
Yeah. But, yeah.
I mean, maybe I'll suck it up and turn on the auto mode for, a week and deal with it and tell you whether my experiences are different.
Okay. Well, I'll definitely just look at my Mac Mini and see. But if you want to do that and have your own results as well, that'd be cool too. I guess I wasn't done bitching about Apple. because when I put this about light mode versus dark mode, it also made me think of the little EQ bars in the Apple Music app for iOS. Is that enough to, like, I guess if someone doesn't know what I'm talking about, in the Apple Music app, if you're playing music next, like if in the list of songs for an album or a playlist, next to the song that's playing, you can see a 3-bar equalizer moving up and down. And I think it's nice that they use 3 bars because they need to keep it small. You've got 3 bars probably represent bass, treble, and the mids. And I think that's kind of, I like that. That's good. It's a good representation. But they are it's just an animated graphic of some sort. It doesn't actually correspond with the music, and I hate that. I was like, I'd rather it not be there. And so I just wanted to say that, have it on the record, that it's stupid.
I agree with you, but I've also never paid attention to it enough to really care. In fairness, though, I don't typically look at my phone when I'm playing music. I'll set it up on the Apple TV and let it play over the speakers and walk away. I'm just not seeing that interface very often.
I don't see it that often either, because most of the time I'm playing music, it's on, it's in my car. But the times that I do see it, it's bad enough. It's inconsistent. The movement of the bars are inconsistent enough with the music that it's obvious that it's not. It's just a graphic, and I think I love that it's there, but it's just not implemented. The execution is wrong. Like, it'd be so cool. It'd be one of those like really great whimsical Apple touch to their software if it was an actual equalizer bar. And I know it would be some level of work to make that happen, but it's totally doable. Like, one of my favorite features of iTunes application in the early 2000s was the visualizer, which was responsive to the music. Whatever was on the screen being visualized was affected directly by the music, and it's what made it so cool.
Yeah, I will say I did enjoy the visualizer, though after a bit I just quit using it as well. And I don't know that there was any real reason to it other than I was being productive at the same time I was listening to things. And so the visualizer just wasn't something I was paying attention to anymore.
Yeah. It even got to the point where they had visualizer options. And so you had like these different visualizers that you could choose from. And they were cool. And I remember when they added the new options for the visualizer, there was also the classic visualizer, which was the very first and only one for the first iteration of the visualizer. But yeah, I didn't use it a lot. I definitely used it way more early on because it was new. But knowing that the visualizer was what you were seeing in the visualizer was a direct result of the music you were listening to, I want those equalizer bars to be the actual equalizer bars for the music.
Yeah, I can understand that. It's probably going to bug me the next time I see it now, but it also probably is something that I won't pay much attention to after that either.
And it's not like, it's like whenever I see it, I'm like, yep, those are not real. And then I just, go about. It's just a fleeting thought. And then the last thing, I was going to say is finally somebody has made the car mount that I want for my iPhone.
Yeah, I find it interesting that the Kickstarter campaign has a charging version mentioned, and I did not see reference to that on the website. So I don't know if that's just a difference between what they have officially prototyped versus... I guess let's back up. So it's Peak Design manufactured a range of accessories and cases and things for mobile devices. And so if you go to Peak Design's website, there's a section under their mobile heading that lets you view those things. And it's from a Kickstarter campaign that just wrapped up, that was successful, and nothing is slated to ship before sometime in the either first or second quarter of 2021 anyway. But all of that said, like, everything that they mentioned in the Kickstarter is visible on the website except for that charging version of the car mount.
So the car mount, if you in the description, there's a they put the text in the description. Sorry, I'm gonna attempt this. On the page for the car mount, there's a text description on the right of the picture, and there's a read more, like it show more link at the bottom of the text. And when you expose all of the text, it does show that it will be available in a charging and a non-charging option.
Okay, I just missed that part then. But I know on the Kickstarter campaign, they didn't go into a lot of detail about the differences either. It was just that, hey, we know that we're making a charging option, and you can go ahead and select it as a reward tier if you want to. We just don't have anything to show you with it yet. So I assumed that part of that was just that it was in the final prototyping stage still, and they just didn't have something indicative enough of the final product to actually create a page for. But it sounds like what they may do is just create kind of a drop down when it comes where you can choose charging or non-charging.
Yeah. Well, what's cool is the charging model comes with a 12-volt lighter plug adapter and an easily routable power cord. And I find the easily routable power cord interesting.
Yeah, I don't really know what that means. We'll see.
Yeah, in my head, it's going to be like one of those, how the GorillaPod is like, you can create it, create a confirmation or conform it in a certain way and it stays that way. I'm wondering if there's some amount of that in the cabling.
It certainly wouldn't put it past them. My initial thought was that it would be more akin to like the flat network cables, something that you could probably slide into a crevice easier instead of having to pop off like a fascia or something and hide it behind it. But, there's no pictures or anything yet, so I guess we'll see. Yeah.
The thing that I'm like, the car mount's not going to be available until mid-2021. The thing that I wanted was a car mount that doesn't doesn't use a vent, and I know exactly where I want to put that in my vehicle, and I'll just have to deal with things right now until that's available. But the thing I love, it's like it will work with the naked iPhone 12 or the Apple MagSafe case, and that's exactly what I want.
Yeah, that was the big detail for me. So I know we talked about it before, but obviously with my affinity toward Peak Design and their products anyway, I backed the Kickstarter the first day. But the car mount was something that I knew that I would want. The video creator kit, I think is what they called it. The basically using your iPhone as a action camera kit, whatever that means to you. And then the mobile tripod were the big things that caught my eye. And so either way, I'm getting those. And it seems like I added one or two other things because, of course, why wouldn't I? But in general, the car mount was exactly what I was looking for, which is my same general criteria, other than I don't mind vent mount as much now because I've used a vent mount wireless charging option for a few months and it's been okay. It's not my preference, but I don't have the complaints about the one that I have that I had about other variants. So I do think that there's a lot of potential decent execution when it comes to vent mount, holders. I think it just depends a lot on that whole concept of what you qualify as decent execution, and most vendors get it wrong. That said, I still just don't like vent mount in general. I really like the stability of something that I can attach somewhere else. And so I really like the idea of Peak Design's mount. It fits exactly what I have in mind a car mount should be.
Well, the fact that they did not make a vent mount at all should tell you something.
Yeah, definitely.
And, it uses the 3M's VHB for mounting. That stuff is like great. Were you still at Apple when the iMacs or I guess, did you ever work on an iMac that did not have an optical drive?
No. The last ones that I remember dealing with were the the last generation of the more squarish body display with the optical drive.
Yeah. So when Apple dropped the optical, so those were attached with a magnet. Am I right? Am I remembering
the
this
display
correctly?
was, yes. Or the glass.
Yeah.
Not the display, the glass.
The glass. Yes. So when, that's right. There was glass. There's space between the glass and the LCD panel. The LCD panel is fastened in with like Torx screws, and the glass is held in place with magnets. And man, they were a pain in the ass to clean that space between the glass and the panel. But when they went to when they revised that and removed the optical drive, the glass was laminated to the panel. So it was no longer held in place with magnets. It uses the 3M VHB strips, the very high bond strips, and you use this kind of like pizza cutter wheel to get into it, and it's pretty cool. But that being said, it's I've had a good amount of experience with VHB, putting it on, getting it off. The last car mount I had in my old vehicle was a Night Eyes Steely car mount, and it used VHB. And that stuff is like really good quality stuff. It's not going to go anywhere, but it's also not incredibly hard to remove. If you just try to rip it off, that's a mistake. If I was going to think about this car mount, how it will be mounted in my vehicle, which is another reason why I didn't want to use a vent mount, because there is a perfect spot in my vehicle for a VHB car mount. But if I ever needed to move it or wanted to take it out, you could just I would take some thin fishing line and just kind of run it through the VHB, and that will basically saw it off, and it won't damage the plastic interior, and it won't damage the car mount. And the residue that's on there will be really easy to peel off. 3M made it really easy to peel the residue off once you get it cut.
Do you actually have to peel it, or can you just kind of wipe it off with something like Gooby Gone?
You see, it's even easier than that. You would just peel it off. It kind of, I would need to mess with it again to be sure of this, but in my head, there's some. You could think about VHB being double layered, and one of the layers in the middle is a strong plastic layer that would be a strong plastic that would be very difficult to tear, easily to take some scissors and cut through it, but very difficult to tear. And it is stuck to the actual adhesive better than the adhesive itself sticks, even though it's a very strong adhesive, better than it would stick to whatever you're sticking it to. So it's actually it's very easy to peel off.
In my head, that makes sense. I think I need to play with it in practice to kind of, understand fully. But the way I picture it is it's more that there's this middle layer that's a column, even though it's very thin, it's still a column. And so the description of using a fishing line or something to kind of trim the far end of that layer means that you still have that column accessible, obviously not indefinitely if you moved it repeatedly, but for limited replacement of location, you're basically just kind of trimming the outer edge and then reattaching it.
No, I think that if you once you place VHB, it's there, and then if you remove it, you need to use another pad of another VHB. In the case of the car mount, it's probably going to be a circle that fits the base of the car mount. You just remove that and put another one there and pop it on. So none of the the VH once you use it and unstick it, then it's it's a one-time use thing. So which reminded me, in the Genius room there was they sent a bunch of strips for us, and they were VHB strips were something that could be ordered as a consumable. It was not part of the repair, not a part number that goes with the repair. It was just a consumable part that the admins could order from that other place where they order things. And we just have like a box of it in the GR, and if you messed up one, then it was like just peel it off and get a new one because it's not reusable. Which made me think of a time where I was working for a third-party Apple vendor in town, and I bought some VHB strips for an iMac that I was repairing, and I think I messed up one of the VHB strips that I had, and I paid $20 for them, and I was like, shoot. And like I could have paid another $20 and gotten some more, but like I wanted to get this computer back to the customer, and I wanted to find out what was going on. So I ended up doing the repair I needed to do, and then I took it to the Apple store and asked them to run some tests on the RAM. I already knew the RAM was fine, and I said, if the RAM passes test, please button it back up. And they did. I took it to them, like with a bunch of blue tape on the screen holding the display in place. And then I asked, I said, I did these things, and I need you guys to run your, do some tests on the RAM, and they did, and they buttoned it back up for me, and I was like, sweet.
It's better than I would have expected the outcome of that story.
Yeah, I got with a genius that you and I both worked with, and he's one of the better geniuses. And when I told him what I needed done, he was like, I know exactly what you need done. I'll do it. And it was done later that day.
Yeah, occasionally when you actually have the opportunity to work with someone that you still know, it's a fairly easy interaction.
Yeah. Plus, because there's all this sort of like stuff you don't have to like go through to prove that you already know what you're talking about, because they already know, especially when you're like, they're the ones they used to, in both yours and my situation, this was a person who would come to us for like, what's your recommendation for this? What do you know about this? So yeah, I always like working with those folks.
Yeah, I find I miss that quite a bit sometimes, because every time I have an issue, I tend to not get anybody I know.
Yeah. I think the last time I had an issue, I went in and I described doing a DFU restore to my phone, because it was actually one of those rare cases where a DFU restore made sense. It now sort of makes sense, because even when it doesn't make sense for the issue that you're having, iRepair is prompting the technician to do a DFU restore. I'm just like, I specifically remember some training that said it's a waste of time to do a DFU restore for a whole bunch of things that we were doing DFU restores for.
Yeah, that was during the iPhone 4 era, I know. 4S for sure.
Mm-hmm. So it just I just remember saying to the technician, I was like, that's not going to make any difference whatsoever. And he looked at me and it was like, I know. Apple just asked that I do that. I was like, okay, go ahead and order one for me. Just, I'll be back in a few days when this doesn't work. He did, and I was.
It's been more of an Apple-centric episode than I thought it might be.
Yeah, it was.
I don't really have anything else, though, at this point.
Neither do I. And now I'm looking at the clock, and I was like, hey, I think this was like a shorter episode. And I'm like, nope, it was 2 hours.
It still went longer. I do have one quick question. Do you have any big plans for Christmas?
No.
We originally thought we might try to do something like we did for Jacob's birthday, and at least have like my brother and sister outside around a fire pit. But our plans got drastically altered Monday when we got a phone call from daycare saying that a classmate's parent tested positive over the weekend for COVID. The classmate did not test positive, but that means that even though we don't think there's a direct exposure, that's too close. And so we're not seeing anybody for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's just where we are in the world. And now that the vaccine is being distributed, I can skip Christmas this year. I'll have my boys with me, and we'll be able to celebrate. And I think Beck and I are going to drive around and drop off our presents to family, and maybe do some outdoor sort of something, like maybe with a fire pit. I haven't worked that out yet, but that's a possibility. but it's at the that would be the most I would do. But it's just too many folks. Too many folks are dying.
Yeah, for sure. And we, even though again we don't think it's close enough to be a cause for concern, it's like, why would we take that risk if we know that anyway? Like, so what? We'll just have a video conversation this holiday. Not a big deal.
Right. If nothing else, it's sort of like I experienced something over Thanksgiving. I got kind of upset because somebody I had spent Thanksgiving with my family. It was all outdoors. It was all socially distanced. We did everything right, and then one family member that Thursday night had a fever. Before he went to bed, he noticed he was hot, and he took his temperature, had a fever. Turns out, he's a essential worker, somebody who was around, had COVID. Might have gotten it from that person, might have gotten it from someone else that didn't necessarily know about. Regardless, he tested positive for COVID. He's doing fine now. He's well. But some of his family members got sick, and nobody had severe symptoms that required hospitalization. There was one emergency room visit, but there was no overnight stay. So all things considered, even though some symptoms were harder than others, and recovery for some folks, like just getting their normal stamina back, is going to take longer than anyone would hope, or longer than most other, like the flu or something. Nobody was in a dire situation where they were hospitalized. And all that being good, I just remember being really upset about it. And the thing is, some sort of like mental barrier was crossed. Some sort of like idea or just sort of a line was like crossed in mentally rather than physically. And so I was upset for maybe a day, and then realized the whole reason we didn't go inside for Thanksgiving and we did everything outside and stayed socially distanced was just in case this thing that did happen were to happen. Consequently, nobody else got sick. Everybody else was fine. And that's why we had Thanksgiving that way. And it just took me a day to just calm down and be like, no, everything's okay. Some sort of mental barrier was breached, but we actually did everything the right way so that in case something like this happened, we'd all be okay. And so I get the too close for comfort thing in that regard.
Yeah, and it makes sense, and it's actually nice to actually hear yes, it worked in this case story. I don't think we hear enough of those to help reinforce that. Say what you will about masks or maintaining some level of distance, it makes a difference. And so it's just nice to hear that firsthand as well.
Yeah. It's the other thing that I sort of discovered about around that time was that I can only control myself, and I can only control my children. And I wouldn't even say that I control my children. I'm just protecting them. They're too young to make certain decisions on their own, and I'm responsible for making those decisions for them. And so I feel like I'm making the right decisions for them, and that's good. But I can only control me. And just because somebody might do something I might not do, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're doing something that is high risk. They might be doing a thing that is low risk that they're okay with, that I just won't do because that's not what I'm comfortable doing. And so I've sort of paid attention to this person is doing this thing that, it turns out if I think about it, that's a low risk thing, and I don't I don't pass any judgment or think he's wrong for doing that thing, even though it's not something that I would do. And so I've just sort of made those fine distinctions between what I would do versus doing something I wouldn't do versus doing something that is obviously putting others around you at risk.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think I might have had a leg up there from the get-go just because of the risk management and risk assessment stuff from a computer security related perspective. I've kind of applied that same mentality to this. And so back in July, when we decided to send Jacob back to daycare, we kind of went through that same thought process. It's like, what is our tolerance for risk? What do we think is risky? Weighing all those factors in, we just kind of started that thought process then and extrapolated it to other activities as we go. And in general, we're just averse to risk as a whole. There have been very few things that we have decided to do, and it's so far worked out for us. We'll see if that trend continues. But, if nothing else, we've at least made it most of 2020 without having that issue directly. And so I would say that our approach at least has yielded positive results, and hopefully it will continue to yield positive results. And if not, then it'll just kind of satisfy the thought process that we had at the beginning, which is let's assume that we're going to get it. Let's just make that assumption up front. That's the worst case. That's if we assume that it's inevitable, we can at least take out anything that is not in our control and not worry about it, and only worry about those things we can control. And so we just kind of worked from it I really think a backwards perspective, but it worked out well. We figured out what we were tolerant of as far as risk goes, and we've limited exposures in general to things that were pretty much required of the job. So there have only been a couple of instances when I've had to go into the office, and only a handful of instances where Emily has had to go meet with clients or prospective clients in person. But even in those instances, we've followed the general idea of maintain distance, wear a mask, do those things that you can to try to prevent an issue. And so far it's worked.
Yeah, this whole time, there's a certain balance to be struck, and that is like you've got to keep your physical body safe. Like if you can't keep, life is now such that things that we were doing on a regular basis have to be, all of those things have to go through a sort of risk assessment so that we can keep our bodies, so that we can protect our bodies. But you can go on such a high lockdown or become so risk adverse that, yes, your body is protected, but now your psyche is going to suffer. And there's a balance that needs to be struck so that you don't go crazy. And I don't mean like, insane, but there's a level of unhealthiness that can, an unhealthy mental state that one could get to if you avoid all social interaction.
Yeah.
There's a balance to be struck there. I certainly think that most of our country is not striking that balance, and that's why we have so many people dying. And so they just need to, most people need to be a little bit more protective of their bodies and other people's bodies. And there are a few people that they need to be like, okay, you need to go out in the sunshine a little bit.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that general assessment. I know for us, I've mentioned it before, we focused on physical health as a manifestation of how to promote better mental health when we're looking at the same walls day in, day out. And that has worked well, but it also helps that we had already shifted predominantly to virtual communication with friends and family anyway, just because of distance. There's not a huge impact to our normal routines other than not going to the office. And quite frankly, I'd rather work from home anyway at this point most of the time. I know we've talked about that anyway. Yeah. I certainly miss some of the interactions, but I don't mind working from home at all. So if I could do that the majority of the time and just go into the office 1 or 2 days a week, it kind of strikes the perfect balance for me. So the only thing I'm really missing are random side conversations. And worst case, I at least get a taste of that with the weekly recordings. So it's, it's not horrible. It's not like I have no access to those same types of interactions. It's just a different form that it takes.
I think about the post-pandemic world is going to look different, and Becca was asking me, she was like, do you think do you think things will be different forever? And I was like, yes and no. I think, well, actually, when I responded to her, I actually responded to her, yes, they will be different forever. But then I described how they're not going to be different forever. And so I have a yes and no answer. It's like, we're always going to remember this pandemic, and we're always going to remember the people that were willfully ignorant and incredibly reckless. But no, the world's gonna go back to a normal state. There was a pandemic that lasted from 1918 to 1920. I think it was a much deadlier pandemic. And you think about the 20s, the Roaring 20s. That was a wild decade. We know more about how bad the Great Depression was or at least I knew more about how bad the Great Depression was than I knew about the 1918 pandemic. It wasn't until this pandemic that I actually knew about the 1918 pandemic as a pandemic as a whole. I'd heard about things, here and there about the 1918 pandemic. I just didn't. Nobody ever called it that. I never put together that there was a pandemic from 1918 to 1920. And so, the world's gonna go back to normal, almost like nothing happened. In I don't know, by the 2080s, there's gonna be people around that have no clue that there was a pandemic in 2020.
Well, the beauty of the human psyche kind of extrapolates to society in general, which is that it has a fairly strong affinity toward a specific state and will pretty much warp anything and everything it can to reach that state, for better or worse.
Yeah. I take that back. I think that I think it was not fair for me to say that folks in 2080 aren't going to remember this pandemic. We have a lot more. We document things. There's so much more documentation of 2020 than there ever would have been of 1918 to 1920. There's so many TikTok videos and YouTube videos and podcasts out there and documentaries that have documented various aspects of it. And just the little snippet videos like Vox is putting out and other sources, it might be a little bit easier to remember, or it might get lost in the shuffle. It's I don't know.
Well, I think I took the sentiment more as, by that point, it's going to be an anecdote. It's going to be historical reference. It might be something that is understood and analyzed and taught, but it's not something that's going to impact life day to day.
No, it's certainly it will be forgotten as a day-to-day thing once it's forgotten as a day-to-day thing, and that won't be long. That'll be just within a few years, if even that. But it does remind me of this TikTok video that I saw. The guy who made it, he's the one and only actor portraying two characters, and he's the teenage kid who looks up and goes, what happened in 2020? What's coronavirus? And then, same guy portrays the dad, and he's his eyes get real wide, and it's just no. So it's a cute little video.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of memes related to that as well. So I think we could continue to extend the after show, but I think that's a good place to kind of call it a night at this point.
Yeah. At some point, we go from after show to just talking.
Yeah, the big thing is I just don't have a good idea of what a clean edit point is at this point.
It's funny. You could just have it just stop. It just stops,
Well, that's typically what I do with the after show. I just pick a point, I cut it, and then I find where we say goodnight, and I drop that in next.
Nice. Well, all right. You have a good evening and a happy Christmas, and I'll talk to you before the New Year's.
Same to you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.